Afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Wu. I am Director of Accessibility Services at Berkeley College, and I'm here with Vincent Moss. Vincent,
hi, everybody. I'm the coordinator for Accessibility Services located in New York.
Hi.
And we are here with our colleagues from the Helen Keller National Center for Deaf, Blind Youth and Adults. And I am going to first introduce the coordinator of curriculum and training, Wendy Chouinard, and she will introduce the rest of the people. First of all, Helen Keller is the only national program that provides comprehensive vocational rehabilitation services to youth, working age adults, and seniors with combined hearing and vision loss. They work together with people who are deaf-blind to achieve their goals and aspirations. And Wendy here is as the coordinator of curriculum training, does nationwide training for businesses and institutions wherever there is a need. And she's very passionate about what she does and has a lot of experience and knowledge. And we're so lucky to have you here along with your colleagues. So Wendy, I'm gonna turn the program over to you so you can introduce your folks and get us started.
Hi, everyone. This is Wendy. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that introduction. I look forward to another session. We did have a great session yesterday where we did have a Doug Rowland, who is a producer as well, who created the film, The Feeling Through, that was nominated for an Oscar last year for short film, and the first movie to ever hire an authentic deaf-blind actor as well. So if you do get a chance, do also watch the session we had yesterday as well. So with me today, I have very special people. I have my colleague, Scott Davert, and I will allow him to introduce himself. I also have Eleanor, who works for us as well as a regional rep. So I will allow them to introduce themselves. Scott?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Wendy. And hello, everyone. This is Scott Davert speaking. I'm the coordinator of the Technology Research and Innovation Center here at the Helen Keller National Center. And a lot of what I do, of course, deals with technology, research, and innovation. It's right there in the name. What that entails, though, is working with companies to try to work with them to develop more accessible technologies for various parts of the deaf-blind population. I also publish articles on technology reviews from a deaf-blind user's perspective. And I do a lot of short-term training with individuals who are deaf-blind, as well as training for professionals both out in the field or at universities, as well as people within the HKNC staff. So I'm a department of about 1.5. No, don't worry. I don't have a half person in my department. She's part-time. So it's quite a lot to do, but I'm very passionate about it and look forward to being with everyone this afternoon and presenting. Thank you.
And Eleanor, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eleanor Coley-Brody. I am functionally hard of hearing. I am deaf with a cochlear implant and I communicate orally, but I also often communicate with sign language, which is why I am wearing a black shirt and I have a black background because it shows contrast with my hands. I have Caucasian skin. And so if I am communicating with someone who has low vision, that contrast helps them see my hand when I'm communicating with them. So my role at Helen Keller National Center is the regional representative for New York and New Jersey. What that means is that I focus on the individuals who are deaf-blind in those two states, connect them with local resources there and/or with our services. We are headquartered in Long Island and we provide comprehensive training, as Catherine had mentioned. And part of my job is to also provide technical assistance training so that entities can build capacity to provide better services and better access to services for individuals who are deaf-blind. I will turn off my camera for the duration of this so that everyone has better access, but I'm here if you need me to answer any questions. I'll also throw my email in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Appreciate that. So going forward, if you have any questions after today's webinar, please do feel free to reach out to that email that is posted in the chat box. Do feel free to reach out to her for any questions. So a little bit about myself. Catherine did talk a little bit about me, but the reason why I am doing these trainings or sessions is, first of all, as I'm a daughter of Civil War refugees. So inclusion, diversity has always been a big passion of mine. I worked in the field of deafblindness for over 20 years in different capacities, more than anything, providing communication access for individuals who are deaf and blind. Now, today's session is I'm going to try to make it as interactive as possible. So please feel free to, raise your electronic hand, put comments in the chat box if you like. I will be reading those comments just so that Scott also has access to them. And we're going to watch 2 short videos that have been produced by Doug Rowland, who is the producer of the film, The Feeling Through. And the purpose of those 2 videos is to showcase the diversity within the deafblind community. We're going to look at the 2 videos. The one deals with diversity and the other one talks more about communication methods or styles that are used within the deafblind community. And the why we are here today is because we want to bring this awareness of a community that perhaps a student in your educational institution perhaps has low vision or has hearing loss. And we're going to find out how we can make sure to build an inclusive environment and how we can show respect to their communication preferences as well. So with that being said, I would like to start off with just, we talked a lot about ourselves, so I want to give you the opportunity as well to talk a little bit about yourself. So if you can put in the chat box, perhaps the languages that you speak, perhaps what you teach, what department you're in, that would be really helpful as well as we kind of start this discussion on diversity. Okay, so please feel free to put in some of the languages or perhaps a language that you would like to learn. And I will also share the languages that I speak. So I do speak sign language, of course, and Spanish and French and Arabic on a good day. So if you can put it in the chat box too, the languages that you use, that would be greatly appreciated.
I speak sarcasm real well. Does that count?
This is Wendy. That does count, Scott. So I do see that there's Ukrainian and Polish, accessibility services, English and Taiwanese. Let me click on it. So that's a good start. So we want to build that. There is a lot of diversity, even within a group like ourselves this morning, English, and I teach mental health, teach health services management. Well, thank you all for being a part of today's discussion. So first of all, let's start off with a great quote by Robert McGee, which says, storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today. So storytelling is a way that you can convey a person's journey, and it has a strong effect on people, on the individuals who listen or who watch these stories. So the 2 videos we have today are also a story being told by individuals who are deafblind. And let me just read more comments in the chat box for Scott. Scott, we do have someone who currently teaches Create an Equitable Workforce, which is part of our new DEI program. So they do talk a lot about disability and disability rights in the workplace. I'm excited for this presentation. Thank you so much, Dr. Heidi. I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, the term deafblindness, we want to see what your thoughts are. If you've heard this term, or what does it mean to you? Have you met an individual who identifies as someone who is deafblind? Just to start the discussion. Have you perhaps, maybe Heidi, have you met someone who identifies as an individual who is deafblind, or someone who perhaps has low vision or hearing loss?
Yes, thank you. I've certainly had students in my class, in particular with low vision issues when we were on site. And so I worked one-on-one with that student to create our materials in larger font and things like that. But I'm always hoping and willing to learn more. So thank you.
Thank you. So the term deafblind does refer to someone with a combined vision and hearing loss. And I'm going to read some more of the comments. It says, deaf or blind, never both, have had students with visual impairments. Joel says, I speak English and teach management. Thank you for doing that. So I'm reading the comments just so that my colleague Scott Davert, and he's going to talk a little bit about himself. But actually, why don't we use the time now before we dive into more of the term deafblindness? Because I do want to start off by saying that the deafblind community is very diverse. And maybe, Scott, do you mind talking a little bit about that and also the reason why I'm reading the comments in the chat box?
Sure, this is Scott. Well, first of all, I guess I should have included in my introduction that I am deafblind. I don't always remember to do that, which I guess speaks to the fact that we're becoming a more inclusive society, now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, yes, deafblindness, I mean, when most people think of it, they think about people who are both deaf and blind completely. But deafblindness is actually a spectrum of both vision and hearing loss. And of course, by spectrum, we mean that the individual can have some hearing remaining and some vision remaining. They could also have no hearing remaining and some vision remaining, or some hearing and no vision at all, which is my situation. So it's a very diverse community, and not everyone who would categorically meet the definition of what is deafblind identifies as such. And we'll get into that a little more as we go along. I think that about covers it, doesn't it, Wendy?
Thank you, Scott. Yes, this is Wendy speaking. And so because of Scott being deafblind, I will be reading the comments on the chat box. So I thank you in advance for your patience while I do that as well. Okay, so we do have another comment, Scott, that says, Laura says, I speak English and teach science. And I have had blind students and deaf students in my class, but have not had a deaf-blind student. That's really good to go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I was just going to add, sorry, I did not address the thing about the comments. The other reason that Wendy is reading the comments is so that I don't have to try to follow them on my Braille display, or if I'm a user of a screen reader that reads the speech out loud, every time someone makes a comment, it will vocalize that. So, and when you have a hearing impairment on top of a vision impairment, a lot of people have very narrow swaths of hearing. I'm among them. So when somebody's typing in the chat box, and don't worry, I have speech turned off now, so it won't affect me. But when I'm in other meetings, that interferes sometimes with the person speaking or me. You know, sometimes it's difficult when you're speaking and you're focusing on that, and then all of a sudden you hear something in your ear that may not even have anything to do with whatever you're presenting on. So that's why we have Wendy reading the comments, which I really appreciate.
Thank you, Scott. And Molly says, I had a student who had a visual impairment. I used to use different color dry erase markers. This student told me she had difficulty seeing what was on the whiteboard, so I use only black now. Thank you for that, Molly. And maybe Scott can, and we'll talk a little bit more about those different types of modifications and accommodations that we can make as well. So to go back to the term, to the deaf-blind community, the community is very diverse. Everyone brings forth different talents and skills, experiences that enrich the community, just like any other, perhaps a cultural community too, right? We bring in our experiences, we bring in our talents, and these stories or these experiences, we are recording, or we have recorded a lot of these personal interviews with different deafblind individuals on topics such as family, employment, diversity, identities. So we're going to start with one of the videos that talks about the diversity within the deafblind community. So as you watch the video, kind of take notice of the variations, not only of communication styles, but also as they describe their own vision loss. So if you don't mind, Catherine, if you can put it on for me as well, and just make sure that you, and then after the video, we'll talk a little bit about some of those visual conditions that were mentioned, as well as some of the causes that are associated with deafblindness. And just before you start that, I did want to acknowledge Joel's comment that says, I had one visually impaired student. I customized all of her reading material and recorded some lectures for her. The experience was very rewarding. Thank you, Joel, for sharing that. Okay. Catherine.
Title reads, Diversity, a Unique Journey. A series of individuals of different ages, ethnicities, and genders speak to camera one at a time. They are all featured on the same set, sitting in a teal sofa chair with a blue curtain behind them, with lamps and plants on either side of them.
Throughout my life, I've seen that many people don't have an understanding of deafblind culture and the deafblind community.
I think that diversity within the deafblind community is so important for people to understand.
Hello. Hi. My name is Isachu Sankanu.
Tony Giordano.
Bienvenido Batista.
James Byrne.
And I'm a woman with Charge syndrome and I'm deafblind.
I have Usher syndrome.
I am completely blind and deaf.
I was born deafblind.
Obviously, a lot of people do think of Helen Keller as, someone fully deaf, fully blind, and assume that that's how everyone is, but that's simply not true.
They think that all deafblind people are entirely without vision and hearing, when in reality, there's different ways to be deafblind.
I'm legally blind. I have retinitis pigmentosa. It's a deterioration of the retinas. I have Coates disease in the left eye that I can't see out of anymore because they lasered it so much.
There is such a wide umbrella of deafblindness because they're two different sensory impairments.
Some deafblind have vision in only one eye. Others can only see what is in the center of their field of vision.
What happens is you start with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, you start losing the vision on the sides first. It's the opposite from macular degeneration. This goes first, then it goes like that, and then you have this little hole here that you can see out of, but not that great because everything is blurry, okay?
I have Usher syndrome type 2, which means that I was born deaf. You can lose your sight immediately at birth or start to slowly notice vision loss around age 8.
I had no idea what Usher syndrome was or had ever heard of it. Wow. You know how racehorses only look forward and really have a tunnel vision? That's the way it was described to me.
When you're born with Usher syndrome, your field of vision gradually gets smaller and smaller. And just so you know, there are several different types of Usher syndrome. Some people experience tunnel vision, some have blurry vision or have specks or spots that impede their vision, or reduced peripheral vision. Usher syndrome is also categorized into different types, such as type 1, type 2, type 3. Other things attributed to Usher syndrome are loss of balance, hearing loss, and night blindness.
Charge syndrome is a series of 6 different anomalies, and it's an acronym. So like C is coloboma, H is heart malformations, A is cranial atresia. That's when your nose is stuffed, like can't really breathe out your nose. And R is developmental delays. There's another word for it, but I'm not gonna say it. G is tiny, we're tiny, and the E is ear malformations. So if you could tell, we have different shaped ears. Some of us are fully deaf, some of us could hear I can only hear a little bit.
I was born with no sense of smell and impaired sense of taste, so I'm able to taste some things, but I'm not able to differentiate between a lot of different foods. For example, different flavors of a sweet candy or different meats. Those are things I struggle with.
I developed glaucoma at the age of 10.
over the last, let's see, I guess 10 years, I also lost hearing. I totally lost hearing in my left ear. Nobody knows why. It just one day I woke up and it was gone.
My entire family is hearing sighted, with the exception of myself, and I'm the only deaf-blind family member. My family did not know that I was actually deaf-blind until my 20s.
I've been blind all of my life, no vision, no light perception. And then when I was about 10 years old, I began to develop a hearing impairment. I was diagnosed at infancy with a condition known as Norrie's disease. It's a genetic condition which almost always leads to blindness.
I started losing vision in 2014.
I was born deaf, and we didn't know anything about the blindness at the time.
I did not know that I was deafblind and did not become diagnosed until the age of 18.
I grew up in the Bronx, going to St. Joseph's, a residential school for the deaf. All that time I spent with the other kids, it never occurred to me that I was deaf-blind, because at that time in my life, I didn't understand what that meant.
When I was 2.5, I developed meningitis. My grandparents noticed that I might be deaf.
Started when I was 10. I had night blindness, and I actually drove a car. Yeah. From 18 up until my early 30s, when I had to stop driving a car because I got into a couple of accidents, and then I started getting cataracts on my eyes, and I had a Camaro, 4-speed on the floor, clutch, cool. I was cool.
I grew up, and I guess around age 10 is when my vision became affected. It was noticed at school. I was playing ball, and I would often get hit with it. And the teacher realized something was wrong. And I was taken to the eye doctor. And ultimately, the doctor told my mom that I had Usher syndrome and that I could become blind, but it wouldn't happen right away. I would gradually lose my vision. And my mom was super worried.
My wife and son and my daughter came up to me, and I really did not know who they were. So I realized that I had to go back to the doctor and find out. I had low vision because I lost half of the vision on my right side. I was very frustrated. I was depressed. I had low vision now. It was very difficult.
There's many things that people have yet to learn about deaf-blindness. They just need to be educated on the topic.
Thank you,
The
Catherine.
title reads Diversity.
Thank you, Catherine. So that's just a small sample of what we're trying to accomplish, is to collect the stories, the unique stories of individuals who are deafblind, and eventually put them into a platform that's going to resemble a lot, if you've ever visited the website called Masterclass, where you can take courses and things like that on different subjects. So we're collecting different narratives and eventually transition them into a platform as such, so that individuals who are deafblind have a platform there where they can share the stories, and individuals like yourselves or students or employers can go in and also get that information firsthand. So the video is just a short video, and it showcases just a small sample of the community. I did want to talk to Joe, if you don't mind sharing your story on how you worked with a student who did have who had vision loss. I don't know if Joe, if you feel comfortable in sharing. I did see that you said your experience was really rewarding. If you can share why it was rewarding and what you did to accommodate the student.
Sure, absolutely. Let me get my little light on. Oh, a little too much light. No, it was, I've forgotten her name. It's been years. But she came to me right in the beginning and had an accommodation, the ones we get from the office. And so we had a conversation after the first class. And this is my business strategy policy class, which has a 25 to 35 page research paper that's a part of it. And she was just going to need some extra help. So I recorded my lectures for her so she could listen to them again if she wanted. When I gave her a test or any assignment, I always made it's going to sound kind of weird, but any assignment what it normally would be on just one page, this was on 5. Every question was its own page, and so I made everything custom, and it was fun working with her, probably because I thought she was fabulous anyway. And the other was I don't know, I really felt like I was helping somebody. So personally, it was rewarding because it was something I'd never had to do before. So I had to make up come up with some new ways to deliver the information and to help her. And so the test was difficult for her. So I set up a thing where we could do an oral exam which was separate from the other, but she was okay with that, and I made sure it was all right with her. I imagine you don't want to just do something different for somebody without talking about it, but it was just cool. It was different and fun, and it kind of reminded me why I like educating.
Thank you for sharing, Joe.
You're welcome.
And it's true, as we saw in the video, there are so many different ways that deafblind individuals communicate, the variations in their vision fields as well. So that's really great, Joe, that you made those changes to accommodate the student.
Thank you.
And then Molly, if you don't mind sharing, I see that you also had a student who had visual impairments, and you used dry markers, but you were asked to switch over to black. Would you be comfortable in sharing your experience?
Sure. I don't know, this might have been about 5 years ago on our Newark campus. And I just some days I want to use red, or for emphasis, green or blue or something like that. And when I used red, she said, can you please use black? She says, I can't see it. I have visual impairment. So, I mean, it was not a big deal. Now I just use black because, you don't know who's in the class. Sometimes you don't get the email about modifications for students sometimes when they have certain issues. So that one I know that to just use black.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Molly. And one of the takeaways for today, of course, is ask. It's always good to ask what a student needs. And Scott, if you don't mind talking about your experience as a student, and how professors or what accommodations you had that helped you be successful, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure, this is Scott. Well, first of all, it was back at the turn of the century when I went to college, for my bachelor's, and I went on to get a couple of master's degrees. Anyway, a lot of the challenges I had weren't necessarily what someone else might have. And what I mean is, some people come into college without the full understanding of what sort of accommodations they need. Some people know what they need because they're used to advocating for themselves in high school, but that's not always true. So sometimes things may not follow the exact procedure that you would think. Like, they may not even go to the Disabled Student Resources Office or whatever the equivalent is on your campus. For me, probably the greatest experience I ever had was working with a professor who, probably is a lot like Joe, in that he really wanted to make sure that I not only got the experience of the class and was given the knowledge, but made darn sure I was included in the class. And do you want me to go ahead and talk about a little bit about technology now, Wendy, or should I save that?
Sure. I did want to also just acknowledge Laura. She is a familiar face from yesterday, so I want to say hello. Nice to see you again. And yes, Scott, if you can go ahead.
Sure. So in the context of the university setting, I use what is called an assistive listening device. They're also the abbreviated ALD. They can also be called an FM system, and we won't get into the details as to why, because it's not really that important. But the concept is the same in all sets of circumstances. I'm a hearing aid user. I have been since before I was in college, and I use one of these systems. And the reason for it is that when you're in a classroom environment, especially like a lecture hall, where there's a lot of echo and there's a lot of, people shifting papers and moving around in their chairs and carrying on conversations and all that, it makes it very difficult to understand the content that I'm supposed to be following. So what this device does, and it comes in many different flavors, just like everything with technology does these days, is the professor or whoever I'm wanting to hear puts on the microphone and speaks directly into it, just like they normally would speak. And it sends a direct signal to my hearing aids so that I don't have to hear all the echoing and all of the shuffling of papers. I have my device here. Again, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I think, is that visible, Wendy? Or?
This is Wendy. Yes, we have visual access.
Okay, good. So this is the device I use. And again, these come in a wide variety with features. And this is a modern device. In fact, it was made in 2022, a very expensive one, by the way. So what I can do is, the professor or whoever I'm talking to can hang on to it, or there's a lanyard that you can put around your neck. Now I'm wearing it. I don't know if the mic is still in the picture. It might be a little bit, but so I don't even really notice it's there. I'm just sitting here talking to myself, of course. I mean, that never ends. But I had an experience too where it didn't go so well. And I'm going to briefly talk about that. I didn't yesterday. So I know there's a couple of people who are here again. I guess you must really like to be punished. But so this is not something I talked about yesterday due to time constraints. When I was in college, I used a different version of the same system. And I went into class and I did all the things that we were supposed to do prior. I emailed the professor, let him know I was going to be in his class in the fall, in the spring when I registered. And, the disabled student resources sent a letter and my email went completely unanswered and we don't know about the letter. Anyway, I was in the class and I went up to him and introduced myself and said, basically, look, I sent you an email and I don't know if you got it or not, but whether you did or not, it's okay. Would you mind clipping this microphone onto your collar? That was the model I had at the time. That allows me to hear you with my hearing aids. And he said, no. He said, you can set it on the table, but that's about it because I won't be recorded. I said, sir, there's no recording. And if you check with the disabled student resources, you'll know that it's only a system to help me hear. And he's like, well, I won't be recorded and I'm just going to leave it on the table. And if you don't like it, then that's too bad. So I ended up leaving his class at break time and not returning, obviously. Don't want to work with somebody like that. Even if you push the issue, it makes things fall further behind. And do I really want to be in a class with somebody who has that kind of attitude? By the way, that whole exchange happened in front of about 50 other people. And it was very, I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't know that there's one. It was very disheartening, I very much felt, even though there were 50 plus people in the room, like I was alone up there at the front of the classroom. And it created a lot of issues for me because, I had to get textbooks in an alternative format, but because at that time it didn't work like it does now. But at that time, that meant that I either had to drop his class or just pick up a random one and hope I could get the textbook. So I ended up going with the random one and hoping for the best. Thankfully, I got a great professor. History was not really a subject I was keen on until I had her, actually. But point being is that not providing these accommodations really can impact everyone. The other people who were there, several of them approached me and said they were dropping the class and all that. And if he had approached it differently and said, to me, well, is this a recording device or what is it? I would have gladly, calmly, civilly relayed that to him, exactly what it was. And, I could have forwarded him the email I had sent him, but, he chose to be very confrontational. And instead of trying to work with me, because I feel like I did everything I possibly could have to help out, get the support I need. But because of the way he reacted, he ended up losing his job, thankfully. He was kind of crazy. He talked about shooting. He kept making jokes about shooting his wife and all kinds of crazy things. So I may have dropped the class anyway. But the point is, ask. And yeah, you may find every once in a while that you have a student with any disability who either A, doesn't know they need an accommodation, or B, may know they need an accommodation, but for whatever reason, they did not register with the Office for Students with Disabilities. And when that happens, they may not be being lazy at all. They may just not be aware. So, just some things to keep in mind when working with, I would say, people with any disability.
Thank you,
I'm
Scott.
I'm done talking to myself now.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Scott,
Wendy.
for sharing. And Joel did put in the chat box, good Lord. So that is, I guess, the best way to express what happened to you. And again, so as we saw with Scott's example and in the video too, communication preferences can vary individual to individual, and they should always be respected, of course. And I also, Laura, I did see in the chat box that you've worked with individuals who are deaf and individuals who were blind. What was your experience? What worked in your classroom? And what types of modifications or accommodations did you have to do?
Well, mine have all been online students. And I think the first one that came about was I'd actually just finished designing an entire course with lots of video content in it to make it exciting for people. And as soon as it launched, I got a letter saying, oh, by the way, make sure that you have subtitles on every single one of your videos because you have someone who's deaf in your class. And I was happy to then be able to go back and realize that all but one of my videos had subtitles and I was good to go. And I reached out to the student immediately. And I remember him just, being so overwhelmingly happy that I had the course ready for him. Because he said, usually gets into a class and doesn't have that access. Which then led me to, as Catherine knows, to be a big campaigner for making sure that our courses are as accessible as possible. Because, a lot of times, as Scott mentioned, I wouldn't tell somebody, no, I'm not going to do it. But, sometimes we don't have time to kind of get those things ready. So again, I've made those different modifications and I try to make it a standard in all of my classes of making them as accessible as possible, which is why yesterday I had asked, I know how to make courses accessible for deaf and I know how to make courses accessible for blind, but I don't know how to do it for deaf blind. And so I'll be reaching out to Eleanor to see what we can do to try to help as many people as possible. It won't be 100%, but at least it's going to be a heck of a lot better than what Scott dealt with.
Thank you. And I do see Eleanor with a thumbs up. So please do, if you have any specific questions on how to make your space accessible for individuals who are deafblind, for the students, please do reach out to Eleanor. She will be able to assist you with more specific trainings. This session today, really, it's to create this awareness of this community, to make sure that if you see a student who does identify as deafblind or who has low vision and a hearing loss, to have that conversation with the individual to see how you can best support him, right? And also I wanted to show the second portion of that video. It's just a 2-minute one, but it goes into a little bit more of their communication styles as well. So if we can put that video, and then at the end of the video, we're just going to, again, just talk a little bit about communication preferences and just a few tips on how to have a little bit of a respect when you interact with individuals that do have the combined vision and hearing loss. So we will be discussing that at the end. So if you don't mind, Catherine, if you can put that for me, just a 2-minute video.
A title reads, Identity, I Define Me. A series of individuals of different ages, ethnicities, and genders speak to camera one at a time. They are all featured on the same set, sitting in a teal sofa chair with a blue curtain behind them, with lamps and plants on either side of them.
I really struggled in the beginning with my deaf identity. I tried to navigate, because I felt like I was never hearing enough, yet I was never deaf enough. I didn't speak English very fluently. I did not sign American Sign Language fluently. And so I kind of fluctuated and kind of was stuck in the middle. And I just really did not know where I belonged.
As someone who's deafblind, especially before I got my hearing aids, it did feel pretty isolating sometimes because not always being able to hear someone, and then that combined with not seeing what was going on around me it does feel very isolating because it limits my ability to participate in society.
And they say, oh, when I meet another deaf person, what they think of is Helen Keller. But I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah Morrison. I am not Helen Keller. I don't look anything like Helen Keller. My life is nothing like hers.
A lot of people perceive us as sometimes being incapable of doing certain things or just not realizing our full potential and our abilities.
I'm a Paralympic athlete. I like to sing. I like to draw, mostly sketching, charcoals, paint a little.
I enjoy writing stories and reading books.
Right now, the big project I'm working on is bicycle repair.
Just because you're losing your sight doesn't mean you can't be what you want to be and who you want to be.
We are just people as well, and so there's no harm at all in asking a question. And a lot of times actually asking is so much better than just making assumptions that may or may not be correct.
Educating others is important.
Ask, and you'll know more.
Thank you. So that was just a short video again to emphasize the need to ask. There is nothing wrong in asking. It's always better to ask what their communication preferences are or what they might need to ensure that an environment is accessible to them. And I did want to read a comment from Barbara Cohen. It says, can you speak to facilitating socializing among students in a classroom when one or more student has a hearing or vision challenge? I have healthcare colleagues who are blind or low vision and some patients who are deaf and or low vision or blind, and being included in a day-to-day socialization can be challenging if folks are unsure of how to go about things. Thank you, Barbara. Scott, before I answer that, did you want to add or respond to that?
Actually, why don't you go first, if you don't mind, Wendy, and then I'll fill it in for you, whatever you miss, which will probably be nothing.
This is Wendy speaking. So Barbara, that is a very, very deep question but there are certain things that we can do to ensure that we do include an individual who is deafblind into the conversation. For example, in a group setting like this one, for example, you've noticed I identify myself before I speak. This is Wendy speaking. And this is to give that visual information. And if we were working with an interpreter, it's also for the interpreter to be able to identify who's speaking for those that use ASL or sign language users. And I'm more so identifying myself. So Scott also knows that it's me speaking, right? So giving that visual information as well helps. Another thing too is, for example, simple things like when you walk into a room and someone in the room might be deafblind or has a vision loss, identify yourself. Say, hi, this is Wendy. I'm in the room, or this is Wendy, I'm leaving. So just to provide that information, the environmental information to the individual so that they can feel that they are included. And there's other things that we can also talk about, but it would require a separate training. So I will have to connect you with Eleanor for that. And she has great resources that she can provide, even trainings on how to have respectful interactions with individuals who do have the combined vision and hearing loss. So I did take note of that. So I will make sure, and Eleanor is here today as well. So she will be reaching out to you specifically if you have any further questions on that, because that's a great topic. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we include individuals who are deafblind into our spaces. Scott?
Sure. This is Scott. That was a really good job, Wendy. You didn't even need me here. I'm just gonna go enjoy the sunshine. I'll see you later. No, that is a good list. And the other reason to identify yourself when speaking is so that captioners can identify who it is. Say, for example, you have someone who's maybe reading a transcript of your class. This may be a deaf individual, maybe deafblind. In either case, they're not there. Can I use that word one more time in a sentence? Those individuals aren't present for the class, so they don't have any context as to who is speaking. Also, for an individual such as myself, my hearing aids focus on the contents of the speech, the sounds that are being made, the consonants and the vowels. It doesn't necessarily focus on the qualities of the individual's voice. So Wendy identifies herself, and I know that's her. And so that's another reason that it is helpful. One other reason that it's helpful is, let's say you have a low vision person who may also have a hearing impairment. If someone identifies themselves as talking and the individual has enough vision to see where they are in the room, they can turn and face that individual, maybe get some lip reading, or at least, make eye contact. Now, if you're someone who's totally blind with a hearing impairment, these devices, the one like I showed earlier, do not have any sort of directionality. It just sounds like, if you listen to, I don't know, AM radio or something, everything's on a mono speaker, right? You can't tell, that person's off to the left of the microphone, or that person's to the right, or they're centered. That's the same thing that happens when you are listening to audio coming through one of those devices. Some of them do have stereo, both left and right channels that are separated, but most do not. So that, again, is another reason identifying yourself when speaking helps.
Thank you, Scott. And I do have two more comments. I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly. Ihor did say, I have to log off now. Thank you for the information. And Dr. Heidi Hofinger, she says, I have another question about giving visual information.
Yes, thank you. This is Heidi. I have long, dark brown hair, brown eyes. I've got a nose ring in. I'm wearing a black shirt, and I have a gray virtual background. And my question has to do with this idea about giving visual information, especially I teach all my classes online. And I've noticed in a lot more like community meetings and things that I've been in on Zoom that people are prefacing their comments with that level of detail in terms of self-description. And I'm wondering if we should all be practicing this more. Is this becoming the norm? Is this something that we should be incorporating into our Zoom classes and things?
Do you want me to take that one, Wendy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is only my perspective. Okay, I don't know from, say, individuals who are deaf and later lose their vision if they're going to tell you the same. My guess is they would tell you the opposite. For me personally, and we actually had a poll on Facebook not long ago in a group, and this was the exact sentiment expressed by those who were blind, whether they had hearing issues or not. And that was mostly no. It slows down the meeting. It isn't really information that matters to me as a person. Like Wendy, you might have green hair or purple hair, or I hope not like me, no hair. But whatever it is, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to treat you differently or think of you as a different type of person because, you have different pronouns, which isn't a visual thing. But, just as a general comment, whether you have different pronouns or whether you have green hair or blue hair or whatever, whether you have a nose ring or an ear ring or an eyebrow ring, I know those are out there. It doesn't really impact me personally. That information anyway, doesn't really impact my view, no pun intended, of the person, nor does it really matter to me. What matters to me is what you're telling me and what you're saying and what you have to say. Now, and Wendy, maybe you can comment on this a little bit, I don't know. For those who are deaf who later lost their vision, they may like that information. The reason is they used to get it if they've had vision. They used to be able to maybe look around and get that info for themselves. Me, I've never had that information, so I don't miss it. You know, it's like driving. Okay, I did drive once, but I've never really driven on a major highway with all kinds of cars around. I can't miss it, you know. I can miss the lack of independence that comes from not being able to drive, but I don't actually miss the act of driving itself or watching a movie. Now, I'll listen with audio description where it's relevant, but you know, it's not something I'm actively worried about.
Thank you, Scott. Dr. Heidi?
Thank you for that, Scott. This is Heidi. I appreciate that coming from you directly. It's very, very helpful, and I will keep that in context. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And this is Wendy. And again, Heidi, if you have any further questions, to reach out to Eleanor. You know, it varies individual to individual. You know, I've been in meetings where they do want the descriptions, and then I've sat in other meetings where they did not want that information. So again, the preferences, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of asking, of course, and, you know, I know that you're researching creating an equitable workforce. So it's definitely something that I think you can connect with Eleanor about, and she can provide more information on that, because we also do have an employment training coming up as well. So when that is released, I think that would be a great one for you as well. So you can see more on the deafblind individual's perspective and the employment setting. But going back to those descriptions, I do know that we do make it a standard practice in our videos to add audio descriptions. It's always beneficial. But again, in meetings and things like that, do reach out to Eleanor for more information. Perhaps she can provide some research as well for that. Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then I did want to read Barbara's comment. It says, my colleague who has RP is the only legally blind male psychiatrist in India. He finds that colleagues leave without saying goodbye, and he doesn't know they've gone, and he finds it embarrassing to be talking to himself. So saying goodbye or I'm leaving is helpful.
I know how you feel.
This is Wendy. Yes, those are one of the, you know, the respectful tips on respectful interactions involves that when you're entering a room, announce that you're there. And when you're leaving as well, make sure that you let them know that you're leaving. It's just showing respect and keeping that mindfulness on there too, just because they don't have access to that information. So you want to make sure that you share that with them. Any thoughts on that, Scott? We do have like 5 minutes left.
This is Scott. I mean, yeah, and I guess I should also differentiate between visual descriptions of individuals in meetings versus visual descriptions in things like movies and TV shows and all that. The difference, part of the difference is that with media like movies or videos of any sort, the audio description is part of it, yes, but it doesn't slow it down. And as an individual myself, who goes to many meetings where I'm the only one who's deafblind, I don't want to be responsible for slowing down the meeting if I don't have to be, you know, to a large extent. You know, I really try my best to keep up with the captions and what's being said. And I'm so focused on that, you know, it wouldn't create a diversion so much, but I'm afraid it would slow down a meeting, especially when you have 15 or 20 people there. You know, that would take the whole time for everybody to go around. So I try to be really considerate about it, you know, and I guess that's what I would add from my perspective. Wendy?
Thank you, Scott. So again, and Laura says, I asked a colleague if I should just mark my quote unquote fun images and courses as decorative to save her time. And she responded with, blind people like fun too, end of quote. So now I have fun writing my alt tags. So thank you for sharing that, Laura. I do have a little document that talks about how to create an accessible document that I sent to Catherine. So if you do want that, let her know. She can send it over. And it was written by our accessibility specialist, Megan Dausch. So I think it's a nice little thing to just keep or even share with your students as well, so that as they enter their careers, they can keep accessibility in the forefront as well. So thank you once again, everyone who attended. If there's any questions, please do let me know now. We do have like 2 minutes. There's also a survey that's going to be sent out. Please do fill it out if you can. Just give me feedback on specific topics that you would like to learn. I think that's a good place to put that information so that Eleanor can have that as well. Including if there is any specific questions like in regards to your classroom, things like that, please do also put them there in the notes section of the survey. Again, today's session was to create an awareness of the deaf-blind community. We want to make sure that we are, of course, we continue to learn more about the community. This session is in no way does this make us experts in deaf-blindness or in the field, but it is just an introduction. And as a platform, when the platform is ready, I will make sure to share that with Catherine so that she can share it with everyone and you can go in there and learn a little bit more as well on your own time. Molly says, thanks so much for an informative workshop. I appreciate it. And Dr. Heidi, this has been wonderful. I will be in touch with Eleanor about further resources. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone. So again, thank you, everyone. And I'll give it over to Catherine.
Hi, this is Catherine speaking. Thank you all so much. And I'm so glad that Helen Keller, all of you could come and meet some of our wonderful faculty and such caring and get to see how lucky we are to have them here at Berkeley. Our students are to have them at Berkeley College. So Wendy, Scott, Eleanor, thank you all so much. I look for an email from me. I'm going to be sending the survey that Wendy mentioned, along with links to the accessibility document and also links to the film Feeling Through, which we did not get to watch, talk about today, but I suggest you watch it. So thank you all so much. Any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to me and I will be in touch, and hopefully Wendy will have you guys back again sometime soon. Thank you all. Take care. Have a wonderful rest
Thank you.
of the day.
Thank you,
Have a great
Catherine.
weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
That was great.
Hi.
It's just us.
Oh, it's Stacy. Hi, Stacy.
Oh, Stacy's here too. Let me stop recording.